Okay, we are on. So we would like to thank Eva for agreeing to present through the NCLD organization to present this webinar on such a very, very important and current topic, leading our children back to school. I'll let Eva share a little bit about her background and history, if that's okay. And Eva presented for us in late June on a webinar about play, which was just fantastic. So we're very pleased to have you here this evening with us, Eva.
Great.
Over to you.
Thank you very much, Roberta, and all of the Montreal Centre for Learning Disabilities team. I have been presenting at your conferences for quite a few years, and of course, this year we were not able to have a conference, and so we started doing webinars. I am a school psychologist by training. I've worked in schools for a very, very long time. At the present time, I work with all of the English school boards of Quebec with the Centre of Excellence for Behaviour Management. And so I have a sense of what it is that's happening on both sides right now of the school divide, both in terms of parents, and although I don't have children going to school right now, certainly my heart is with all of you that are having to send your children to school under these particular circumstances. But just to assure you that we are working also with the teachers in the schools to make sure that everybody has the best experience possible. So I'm going to just share my screen here, and there we go. And just let you know that what I'm going to be sharing with you tonight is meant to help you, to help your children deal with a situation that none of us have ever had to deal with before. We are totally at sea. We have none of us ever dealt with this. I am 70 years old and have never lived through anything like this at all. And so we are living something totally new. Really, the world has shifted. The world, as we know, has shifted on its axis. And we don't know if it will go back to what it was before, but it is definitely not back at what it is right now. We are wondering what to do. We don't know which way is up. We don't know which way is north or south. And yet, as parents, our job is to be there for our children, to help them in this time of turbulence and change, in this time of incredibly high emotion, when really we have so many questions. You know, will this create anxiety for my child? Are my children going to be able to follow the rules? How do I help my child emotionally? What about learning? What about COVID and getting sick? Oh, my child is really resistant and a little worried. And of course, in 1 hour, I am not going to be able to answer all of your questions and be able to give you all of the answers that we need. But I will do my best. I will do my best to give you some guidance to help you. Excuse me, Roberta, I don't know if your microphone is still on, but I'm hearing some background noises.
It is.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so just to continue, I know you have a lot of worries. I know that if you had your way, you would wave a magic wand and go back to the way that we were before. You would wave your magic wand and make people do what you believe is right for your children. But right now we are dealing with what we're dealing with. And so, as I say, I'm going to try and help you to move forward, to help your children, to support them so that they suffer the least from what it is that's happening here. One of our vice principals at Riverside School Board wrote us an email in the spring, and this sentence absolutely struck me. She said, "This is not the vision of the school we hold in our heart." And you see a heart and you see the tears, because we are having to grieve that all of the wonderful plans that schools have been making. And I work with all of the English school boards of Quebec. I work with staffs. I've seen all the plans that they've made. I've seen the progress. I've worked in this particular role for close to 20 years, and I've seen huge changes in schools. I've seen huge efforts that people have made to do things differently, to understand children, to learn about children. I have the honor of working with young teachers at McGill and at Concordia University, and we were on a very good trajectory, and that has stopped. But I just want to let you know, school staff are working very hard to make school a safe and engaging place for students to learn. They are doing everything they can to figure out how they can connect with the children, to let the children know that they're there to care for them, to find every different creative way that they can to interact with the children, to communicate with the children, to be the leaders and the teachers and the caregivers of your children. Masks are going to be an issue, and a lot of schools now are going to be posting pictures of their teachers with and without masks. Some of you might actually get emails to that extent, to that end. They're doing everything they can. They're coming up with all sorts of creative ideas. I don't know if you can see this little picture here, but it's a hockey stick. On the end of the hockey stick is a little dog going for a walk. This was thought up of by a teacher in May, when we were doing more aggressively doing the physical distancing. But just want to let you know that their minds, their hearts, their brains are working on figuring out how to make this work for everybody and to keep everybody safe and to keep everybody learning. So be reassured that this is happening. And as I had mentioned to Roberta when we first got on, I will be giving a series of talks this week to teachers about what else they can do to keep to work with the children, to keep them safe, to understand them. And so there is a huge effort happening here to work with your children under the particular circumstances that we find ourselves. And we ask ourselves, when the world feels unsafe, what do our children need? They need the adults in their life. Some of you might have heard Dr. Deborah McNamara. We had invited her last May to speak with us. She's a clinical psychologist from Vancouver. And one of the things she said was that the most important message our children need to hear right now is not more about COVID, but about who their adults are, the people who will care for them and carry them through this storm. And it's not information that makes a child feel secure. It is really relationships. Relationships with parents, relationships with teachers, relationships with daycare workers. This is where we need to put all of our effort. When children are attached to us, it gives us an incredible ability to care for them. It's a hierarchy. We want to be able to take charge of them. We want to be able to lead them, to guide them. But most importantly, we need to create a sense of home, to provide comfort and rest so that children can feel calm in the presence of the adults who are caring for them. And when they don't know what to do, that they actually will turn to us and look to us so that we can guide and direct them. And many of you have probably found, because you've had to be together as a family, especially in the early days, that you started to get into that role more and more with your children because you were the ones that they were with. And so it's a really an important role. It's a little bit harder with our teens who have so much more ability to connect and connect with other people. But right now, it is really critical that we get into this lovely hierarchy with our children and that we are able to care for them and provide for them what they need. And so one of the messages I want to give you this evening is to make the relationship the priority. I know, and probably many of you have had many days when you were tearing your hair out and you didn't know what else to do with your children, and you're kind of going to be a little bit relieved that somebody else will be sharing the burden of the day-to-day care of your children. Absolutely. But the bottom line is, no matter what happens at the end of the day, our children need the reassurance that we will be there for them. And so no matter what's happening, no matter what the issues are, we need to continually come back to relationship. I'm going to be here. I'm going to take care of you. What's really interesting is that we are actually wired with a whole set of instincts. And most of you already know this because the minute the pandemic hit, and even as we've been going through the pandemic, your alpha instincts have come to the fore. And this is what's exactly happening right now, is that part of you knows you have to send your children to school, and part of you knows some of the problems with that, and you want to protect your children. So when we are in that alpha mode, we want to orient and to protect and defend and to guide and to look out for and to possess and to lead, and we know it's a big role that we have to do. But these are instincts that we have, and they will help us. And I'm going to share with you this evening some of the things that you will need to consciously think about as a parent who's in charge, so that you can help your children through this difficult time. If we provide, as we're providing, ideally our children in our care should be seeking and looking to us. They want to get their bearings first. They want to get help from us, look up to us, belong to us, to follow us, to look for guidance. And of course, the teachers in the school and the staff in the daycares in the school are all going to want to guide the children so that everyone can keep safe and as healthy as we possibly can. What we are seeing here is actually a bubble where attachment keeps children safe. And when we think about this, it's really very interesting because there are many examples of this, but the one that comes to my mind was a lovely, lovely movie called Life is Beautiful with Roberto Benigni. Now, I didn't actually understand the movie when I first watched it, but luckily, one of my mentors, Dr. Gordon Neufeld, helped explain the movie to me. And when I saw the movie through those eyes, I realized, oh my goodness, I did not realize how powerful and protective our stance and our role as parents and guides is to children. Because in that movie, it was about a father and his son that were taken into a detention camp, and the father basically made the whole situation seem like a game to the son. And it was a very dangerous place that they went to. But every time the child looked at his father, the father had a big smile on his face. And if any of you know Roberto Benigni, he has kind of a crazy smile. But basically what happened was when his son looked at him, his son basically was saying, "Is it okay?" And the father gave the impression that it was going to be okay. And this is one of the things that I want to share with you tonight, that our role right now is going to be that we need to take our caring alpha role and convey a very strong presence, an alpha presence, a presence of confidence, because it's important right now that our children see the adults as being able to handle their world. Now, being a true Canadian myself, I know that we are all in a bit of a bind here because we like to be honest, we like to be truthful, we don't like to say things that we don't truly believe. But in this particular case with our children, we need to act more confident than we feel inside. We have to present to the children that we are the answer to what they need. It doesn't mean that we have all the answers. It just means that we are going to be the ones who will be for them, there for them, who will figure things out. And again, if you remember back to, and for me, it's March the 12th. On March the 12th, I was one way. On March the 13th, I was another way. And we didn't even know how we were going to deal with a pandemic. But we figured it out. Bit by bit, we sorted out what we should do, what we shouldn't do, how we need to do it. And so we don't always have all the answers, but we want our children to look to us and trust that we're going to figure it out. And so we need to continually give children the message. We can and will take care of them. And of course, one of the things that we have to do is take charge of circumstances that affect children. So we need to guide them, tell them what we think is important. And every one of you is going to have things that you're going to be telling your children that you would like them to do when they go to school. And you might want to communicate that to the teachers and to the school so that they can do that the best they can. And of course, what we are wired to do as alphas is to anticipate and prevent. And this is one of the reasons why this time right now in August is so difficult for you, so difficult for all of us, but especially for you that are parents sending children back to school, is it's hard to know exactly what it is to anticipate and how we can prevent the worst case scenario from happening. And that is a huge bind. But that is an adult role, an adult situation, an adult concern. Our children actually need us to communicate with them and to provide reassurance, even when we don't feel terribly reassured. Because the thing is that if we're not reassured, then that is going to make things even hard for them. So we need to say things like, your teachers are getting ready for you, your school is getting ready for you, your daycare person is getting ready for you. They are figuring things out. We're all working together. We're going to do the best we can to keep everybody safe. And things will get better. Things will get better. We're figuring things out. The thing about it, of course, as you all know, is we can't actually tell our children that everything will be okay, that they will be okay. and you know, heaven forbid that one of them might get sick, but what we need to tell them and reassure them and let them know over and over and over again that if something happens, we will take care of them. We are there. We're the ones they can lean on. We have resources. We have people that we know. We have situations so that we will keep taking care of them. And for many children, that is their biggest fear, because an immature being knows that he or she cannot take care of himself. They want to know who's going to take care of me. And that's what we need to continually reassure them, let them know, give them the impression that we are confident about it. Obviously, there's going to be so many times when we won't know what to do. But one of the things we're going to have to train ourselves to do is to act confident, even if we don't feel confident underneath. Our children look to us, and my daughter, you know, sadly, many of the things that I've learned by the mistakes that I've made. And when my daughter was 12 years old, she had an illness that nobody knew what it was. And I was trying to be as confident as I could. I did not have this information, so I didn't understand how important it was for me not to let her see the fact that I was upset about what was happening. I'm not that she couldn't see any upset at all, but that I really didn't know. And one day, I guess I must have shared way too much to her. And 20 years later, you know, she came back to me and said, you know, Mom, when you said that, that's when I started panicking. So we need to keep on this face. We need to trust that even though we don't know, that our children want to believe that we have that. And so one of the biggest things that we need to be careful about is not to speak about our concerns or too many of our concerns in front of the child. I'm of a generation when the adults in my world, when I was a very nosy little girl, when I would be like sneaking a little looking around and trying to listen to what the adults were saying, I remember adults saying to each other, "Oh, little jugs have big ears," and they would stop talking about things that they didn't think was appropriate for us. Very much more difficult to do in this day and age with social media and all the things around. But I really encourage you to monitor yourself, to monitor what you say to your friends, to your spouse, to your family when the children are around. Because sadly, very often we say something and then we have a solution for it, but the child just hears our concerns and doesn't understand that we are going to find a way through. It's okay to be uncertain and anxious, but the large extent of it, and I know that many of you have large worries right now, needs to be shared with other adults, with other people. And sometimes all we can do is really vent. We can't even do anything about it. And yes, absolutely, you need a chance to share, but try and keep that from the children, because it just can be overwhelming to their system. One of the other things that I think is really important for us to remember in this time is to talk about emotion. And we have two big emotions that are happening right now. The biggest one, of course, is alarm. And all of us are in a very high state of alarm, especially at the thought of going back to school and trying to figure out how we can make schools a safe place. And we have high alarm, and it is important for us to talk about our alarm, but it's also important for us to acknowledge that our children are feeling that as well. It's very interesting because I've been listening to many of the interviews that are done on the radio and on TV with parents. And again, of course, I know my heart goes out to parents because we're trying to navigate a world that is very different from the world that we knew. And parents are saying, well, I don't know what to do. My child keeps talking about being scared, and my child keeps crying, and my child is very worried. And my sense is that actually that is very normal. That is actually quite healthy. We are all scared. It is scary. COVID is scary. Our children are worried about us, about getting sick themselves, about us getting sick, about their grandparents getting sick. What's important, though, is that when a child talks about it, that we actually acknowledge it, that we come alongside it, that we give it validity. There's a sort of a way of thinking, a train of thought that's going on that says, oh no, well, if you say that COVID is scary, the kids are just going to get more scared. They're already scared. But if you can give voice to what's going on inside of your emotional world, that is actually healthier. That is healthier. And so if, again, we have to do it in a way where we kind of calmly acknowledge, yes, you're worried about us getting sick, you're worried about grandma getting sick. Oh, I know. Yes, it is very worrisome. We give it a little bit of space, but we will take care of you. We're going to take care of grandma. People will come and take care of us. So we reassure, but not too quickly. We give some space for that emotion to move around. And actually, I am much more worried about the children who are not talking about being scared, who are not talking about being worried. Those are the children that worry me more because their emotions are stuck. And when our emotions are stuck, other kinds of things happen. Now, the other big emotion that we're all feeling, including our children, is frustration. And frustration is the emotion when things aren't working the way we want them to work. And we need to acknowledge that. We're lucky if the child is talking about, I hate COVID, COVID, stupid, stupid COVID, I wish it would go away. Oh, yes, it is really frustrating that COVID won't go away. We need to come alongside that frustration. Sadly, many of our children won't even know they're frustrated with COVID. They're going to be frustrated with a pair of socks that don't fit right. They're going to be frustrated with, with a friend who was mean to them. They're going to be frustrated with all sorts of things. When actually the biggest frustration are the limitations that COVID is giving us. It's not fun to wear a mask if you have to wear a mask. Okay, it's not fun. It's not fair that you can't hug your teacher. It's not fair that you can't move around in the school in the way that you wanted to move around. There's lots of things that are frustrating. And in a moment, I'm going to talk as well about the importance of tears. But again, naming it, talking about it, acknowledging it, coming alongside it is really important for children because they need to know that their experience is a valid experience. So we need to let them know it's okay to feel upset and angry. One of the hardest things about emotion for us as parents is that we don't want our children to be upset. We don't want them to be unhappy. As I say, we all wish we could have the magic wand that could take this away. But if you can't take it away, one of the best things you can do is accompany the child, journey alongside the child, be with the child, give them permission to feel what it is that they need to feel. When emotions are shared, they actually move through us. When emotions move through us, actually our emotional well-being improves. Mental health is not a question of whether or not we are angry or upset or frustrated or worried. Mental health is about whether the emotions can move through and then allow other emotions to take their place. But we have a lot of emotions that are going on right now, a lot of emotions. And this is one of the challenges I'm sure that you as parents have faced, is that there's lots of ups and downs of emotions, and it's perfectly normal. But actually, if when emotions are moving, this is a sign that a child is actually going to be getting to where they need to go. Other ways that we can continue to show children that we're taking care of them is obviously by providing and preparing food. I don't know if this is true, but I'm assuming that many of you got into food preparation while you were at home with your children. Perhaps you have a little more time for it right now because you're not rushing off to hockey games and to gymnastics classes and so on. One of the tangible signs for a child that the parent is taking care of them is that we provide food, that we make food available, that we're making their comfort foods. I'm sure most of you have eaten more mac and cheese than you ever wanted to eat, but you know what? In this next little while, as we get adjust to going back to school, as school plays itself out, you might need to go back to the comfort foods, making sure that there are muffins and other things that children enjoy eating there, because these are all signs for children that when I don't know what's happening in my world, someone is caring for me. Providing comfort items, blankets or stuffed animals. Again, you probably found last March and April that a child, maybe a 6-7-year-old child who no longer needed his favorite teddy bear, all of a sudden wanted to find the teddy bear. Well, I know as time went on, Teddy went back into his little corner. Well, you might find with your 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds, even 12-year-olds, that in this time of transition back to school, they're going to need those animals, those blankets, those comfort items yet again. And so don't be hesitant to give that. This is, even though it seems like a regression, it is actually a way in which we as humans are able to get through difficult times. So if Teddy has been relegated to the far corners, dust him off, dust Teddy off. You know, go find that blanket, wash that blanket, bring it around, put it in a basket, put it somewhere where it's there. Give the child permission to go back to these comfort items that they used to be independently, you know, quite capable of living without. Well, they will need it when there is this time of high emotion. We also need to continue to create opportunities for play. So if you were doing board games and maybe as summer went on and whatever family games, you did it less because when you were, you know, when we were all in quarantine and self-isolation, we were doing that. Now in the summertime, we have a little bit more freedom. Well, as after school time happens, bring these back, because then play is a fun way of creating attachment. It's a fun way of being together, of spending together time. And again, this is what our system, our emotional, our nervous system needs, is this sense of comfort and coziness and being together. And play is one of the most wonderful ways that we can do that. And of course, sometimes just getting outside the home. Again, I see a lot of families who were taking walks together. And again, this is something that you might want to do with your children. Play is really important for emotional well-being. This is one of the biggest messages that we are going to be giving, my two colleagues, Martine Demers and Catherine Cora. This is going to be one of the biggest messages we're going to be giving to the school and school staffs, is that despite the fact that, yes, there's a lot of pressure to keep children safe and also to get back and to try and catch up and in reality, of course, we are going to, it'll be a while before we can get back to the typical teaching, learning situation that we had in schools. But one of the things that we're recommending is, because if a child is emotionally feeling well, the learning will happen quickly. And so one of the things we're recommending is playtime, 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 more than they normally do, as best we can. Because when children are stirred up emotionally, their play actually reflects the themes that they are struggling with. And it's how they can make sense of all the emotions that they are experiencing. A couple of years ago, there was a large tornado in Gatineau. And I remember I was talking to some staff, and one of them was saying, "Oh my goodness, I got to tell you the story about what's been happening with our kindergartens. Our kindergartens have been playing tornado for the last 3 weeks." Oh my goodness, that isn't morbid, that isn't macabre. They are actually playing through all that they experienced, all the worries that they had. Um, one of my other colleagues at the Neufeld Institute has written a beautiful article called "My Child is Playing Coronavirus Tag. Should I be worried?" Well, again, the coronavirus was incorporated into play, and that is how children could let it out. When we play, we draw pictures, we make structures, we have games, we do music, we do dance, any which way, so that the emotions can come out. They usually can come out in a way that is safer, and they can come out in a way that doesn't necessarily distress other people. They come out in a way a little bit kind of sideways. I mean, I'll talk in a moment about how alarm comes out through play, how frustration and attack come out through play. But play lets these things come out in a way that doesn't cause other kinds of problems. Play is kind of like the pressure valve for emotion. And so when we are in, and this is what we're in right now, we are in a pressure cooker right now. We need to give children a place where that emotion can come out. And actually, it's a very nice place because it doesn't require anything from us except the permission to allow children to play. And certainly, again, my recommendation for the month of September and probably into October is homework should be play. Evening time should be about play, so that children can deal with all of the emotions that are happening with this entry into school. You know, it's very interesting because all of us play with alarm. Everyone has played peekaboo with their babies. Peekaboo actually helps children, babies, young babies, figure out how to deal with alarm, because when you go boo, you know, peekaboo, it gives them a chance to deal with a little bit of alarm in the context of attachment. And actually, we have maybe stopped doing some of these kinds of things with our children because we didn't want to scare them. But the alarm system actually needs a little bit of alarm to calibrate itself. Scary games and activities and so on, scary stories. some of the children will actually want scary stories because they are feeling alarmed, and the story kind of takes the alarm away from COVID and puts it into a story. Now it's the three bears, and now it's the big bad wolf. And so COVID can become the big bad wolf, and it plays itself out in the story, in the game, in the activity. Children want to know if they're being rescued. Hide and seek. Actually, many of us should be doing like playing hide and seek with our children, because of course, when you hide, you want to be found. And that's what our children want to know. Even things like daring games or startle play have to do with the alarm system, and they're not a bad thing. They look scary to us, but they're actually part of what children naturally do to create an alarm system that works well. Safe at home, rough and tumble play, ambush games, monsters and scary creature play. As I say, in this particular kindergarten, they play tornado. A lot of your kids are going to be playing hospital. They're going to be playing with dying. They're going to be playing with ambulances. They're going to be playing with fire trucks. They're going to be playing with things because these are all issues that they're wondering about. But when they play them through, it's kind of like their brain can process what it is that's happening. And so this is why we need to give children time for this, space for this, away from their digital devices. And I understand that, sometimes the digital devices are helpful for keeping children occupied. But if at the end of the day, or if throughout the day at school, we can give children time to play with these things, we will see that they will be playing out in their play the things that they're concerned about. And I did do a whole session on play, so please refer to that. I know that the recording is available. The other emotion that our children really are going to have to work through is the emotion of frustration. And there's two parts to frustration. Frustration is the emotion that moves us to change things. And I know that many of you are trying actively to change the way in which the ministry is dealing with what's happening here. And absolutely, that is your job, that is your role. The emotion that is moving you is frustration. Um, and so what we need to so that's one. The other thing that can happen with frustration is, of course, the desire to attack. Now, in play, in that bubble of play, this is not so much for us, but for our children. In a world that child cannot change, we need to give them opportunities to change what they can change. And what kinds of things can you do? They can do building, they can do fixing, they can do reassembly and reordering. Dr. Neufeld, this is his paradigm, so he knows how this all works. When COVID struck, he and his wife spent hours and hours making puzzles. And when we said to him, why were you doing puzzles? He said, well, because my whole world was something that I could not control or change, but I can work at a puzzle, I can make a puzzle, I can finish a puzzle. So if there's something that maybe you as a family can do, pull out the puzzles, build a puzzle together, because at least that satisfies us somewhat this desire to change it. Not, of course, if you do want to use your energy to influence the powers that be to do things differently, go for it. But when we can't change things out there through play, we can do that. And growing and planting is another way of using this particular energy. Of course, the attacking energy, that volcano explosion, I'm sure many of you have experienced that, both with your children and possibly with yourselves. That attacking energy is going to need to come out, and we need to give more space for it. Our children need to have opportunities for mock aggression and play fighting. I know that we don't often approve of those things because we think if children play fight, they're going to fight for real, but actually the research is showing is that if you can get your attacking energy out in a playing mode, you have less of a chance of it actually leaking over into the real mode. One of the things we're recommending to staffs at schools, to teachers at schools, if we can, is to buy some pool noodles, do some play fighting. At the end of a day, at the end of a work day, at the end of a school day, there's lots of attacking energy. If you have a backyard, if you have a place where you can go get some pool noodles out and do pool noodles with your kids, this will be fun for your teenagers as well, because if we can get that out in a play mode, then it's less likely to be attack against the people. Children are going to pretend to have pain. Some of them are going to want to destroy things. Again, in some of the schools that I work with, we say that we'll build something, but then also let children push it down. When we have snow, we'll be able to do snow castles and stomp them down, because that can then keep that attacking energy within the play bubble, war games and so on. And of course, just being the silly self. Sometimes we just need to get it out, and we need to be the minister of silly walks. Anything that we can do so that this energy that comes from our sympathetic nervous system can get out in a way that doesn't hurt other people. And now comes one of my final messages, and that, of course, is the healing power of sadness. We need to grieve a world that will not be the same for a long time. And what we need to understand is that grieving is an emotional process. And the first part of that emotional process is the letdown. It is the looking into the abyss. It is the not knowing what's going to happen. It is the looking into the deep darkness and saying, how are we ever going to get out of this? And what's really interesting, those people that have done incredible studies on grieving and the process of grieving have found that if we allow ourselves to go deep into the sadness, that our brain naturally moves us to bounce back. It's a natural human movement. We've seen this over and over again in many different generations. My parents were of the generation with the Second World War. My parents had to leave their native land. They had to come to a country by themselves, and again, I don't know if they did grieving because I never talked about this with my parents, but they must have, because they bounced back. They were able to figure out a way through. In a child, tears are the best indicator of an emotional system that is functioning well. I am not worried about the children that cry. Some of our children, especially once they go back to school, are going to need to cry every day for a good half hour at the end of the day because of all the changes, of all the unknowns, of all the things that are going to be hard on them. Those tears need to flow, and we need to be able to do that, because if we give the message to our child that there is something wrong with them for being sad, we're going to stop their tears, and then we're going to stop the opportunity to become resilient, because resilience is that bounce back, but first it has to come with tears. One of the best gifts we can give to our children is to value their sad tears and to make rooms for them to flow. If they flow, then you have adaptation. But adaptation, so the ability to cope with a world that doesn't want to work the way we want it to work, and by the way, this is true for ourselves as well. Adaptation requires a soft heart and a safe place to cry. And a soft heart means that we can tolerate feelings of vulnerability. And this has been a challenge for many of us. We actually need to feel our vulnerability, and some of us have not been able to have our tears, and probably won't for the next few weeks as we navigate the whole school going back to school issue. But at some point after, sort of the dust has settled a bit, we need to have a good cry about all the things. We need to let ourselves feel that vulnerability about how scared and upset we were. So we need to go back to that softness in our heart, and a safe place to cry, somebody who will keep you safe while you are vulnerable. And this picture reminds me of a young man that was working in one of our schools. I was doing a series of workshops around this material, and every time came back to the importance of tears. And he was a very polite young man, and came up to me and he said, "I just need to tell you something. I have a 6-year-old daughter, and I'm her dad, and I want to keep her safe." And I said, "Of course you do." And he said, "And so I know you say that crying is important, but I am so afraid that my daughter will cry at school, and then kids are going to laugh at her and they're going to bully her. And so I need to keep her safe, Eva. So what I've been telling her to do is to stop crying. And I've been getting her to practice not crying." But he looked at me because he knew that that wasn't quite the right thing to do. It took me a while, I have to admit. I had to really think it through. And then finally I had kind of this light bulb moment. And I went up to him and I said, "I truly honor your huge, wonderful desire to keep your daughter safe. And you are absolutely right. She should not be crying outside of the home. But she will need to have some place to have her tears. How about you say this to her? Honey, it's better if you don't cry at school. Now, a lot of our schools understand crying, and don't worry, we're going to make sure that our kids are safe if they do cry at school. But many children are like my daughter and my son. They kept their tears until they saw me. And so I said to this young man, I said, why don't you tell your little girl, you keep your tears for me? And the interesting thing is, he came back a few weeks later. He says, oh my goodness, Eva, it's working. She said, no, Daddy, I didn't cry at school today. I didn't cry at school today. And then she cried with him. We want to be the safe crying place for our children. It's very hard for us because when children cry, we feel distressed, but it is what we need to do. So we need to help our children to find their tears. And the first thing we need to do, of course, is to reflect back about the emotion. If they're frustrated, we need to say, that didn't work for you. That wasn't what you had in mind. Or if we think they were in alarm, that was scary. You didn't know what was going to happen. Or if they, really wanted their friends to like them, and no, you really wanted him to like you. And we have to match the emotion. We have to make sure that the child believes that we understand how intense that feeling was for them. But then our job, our role as adults, is to move subtly towards the sadness. Oh, that wasn't what you had in mind. My goodness, you had so many good ideas and nobody wanted to follow them. So we bring them to sadness. And when the child starts to cry, we need to be, and of course, if we're leading them to their tears, then we know why they're crying because we're leading them there. But sometimes children will just burst into tears, and we never should ask why. I know people say, well, if I don't ask my child why they're crying, how am I going to know how to fix it? Well, first of all, the point here is that we're not going to fix what it is they're crying about because very often they can't even tell us the true reason. The true reason is much bigger. Right now, all of our children have a deep well of sadness within them. I couldn't see my teacher's face, but they're gonna sometimes if we ask them why, they're gonna give us like a silly minuscule reason, and then we try and fix that reason, and then they give us another reason, and we try and fit that. When actually, their sadness is nearly an existential sadness. So don't ask what it is. If it's just about a baby bobo on their finger, think to yourself, oh, they're crying about COVID. Oh, they're crying about all the things that have changed at school. Oh, it's not about the baby bobo. It's about the big things that we need to cry about. And when the tears start, sit quietly with compassion. Trust in the bounce back. Believe, and I've seen this happen so many times. The person starts crying, they go deep into their sadness, and then all of a sudden they kind of come out of it and they go, okay, I think I'm going to be all right now. And that's all we want. We need to resist our alpha instincts to make things better or to problem solve. Sit on your hands, pretend there's duct tape over your mouth, sit quietly with your child, hold them, comfort them in whatever way you can. Give lots of space for the sadness and tears. And then if there's a problem that needs to be solved, you can solve it. But I'll tell you honestly, most of the time the child comes up with their own solutions. To help an older child and ourselves, because remember, we too need to feel our sadness and tears. Sometimes watching a reading a sad book or a sad movie or a sad YouTube, in a dark room, shoulder to shoulder in a dark car or on a walk, a little bit of tinge of sadness in our voice, normalize, it's okay to feel sad. We all feel sad, and once the tears appear, even if the person dries them up, okay, a little bit of sadness was felt. And my recommendation, by the way, for mental health for all of us is if it's hard for us to find our sadness and our tears, watch 3 sad movies in a row. Have a good cry. I watched long ago Family, where adoptees are really reunited with their families. That's what makes me cry. It's very, very important for us as the adults as well to experience our deep sadness in a world that isn't working for us. So what about me? Absolutely. Identify your own support system, your village, the adults to whom you can speak, your family, your partner, your friends. Give yourself permission to vent. Again, there are many, many things to vent about. Just don't do it in front of your children. Find your own tears. Give space for that. If you aren't a crier, then just give space for the deep sadness. There's much, much sadness here. And if you have a little bit of leftover time, do nurture your passions so that you can have playtime and so on. Big question everyone's asking. Well, what about the learning? What about the learning? And again, I don't have a lot of time tonight, but I'm just going to reassure you. During this entire time of COVID, our children's brains were growing and developing. Maybe they were not getting the skills that they needed, and I know that many of you have children with special needs, and you are used to having other people work with them and work on their skills, and I know they missed out, but actually in that time, their brain was growing and developing. And so, yes, they will learn. They've maybe learned other things. The brain has not stopped growing and developing. School is not the equivalent of brain growth and development. School is about creating a process and giving the children the skills they need to be in our society. But the brain continues to grow and develop, and we need to believe that when things stabilize again, actually some of the teachers are going to be surprised at how quickly the children are going to catch on to something that they might have found difficult a few months ago, because the brain has continued to grow and develop. So I want you to know that you are not alone. We are all in this together, and we're supporting you as best we can. There's the Montreal Centre for Learning Disabilities. They have many, many wonderful resources on their website, more sessions that they're going to be giving. And so it's, that also, they're there, and there are many other agencies as well. For myself, I am, as I say, the coordinator of the Centre of Excellence for Behavior Management. On our website, we have, under the tab of coronaviruses, we have some resources for parents. There's articles and things that you can read there. We are working with the teachers. We are working with the schools. Our biggest desire right now is to create the conditions in which our children can feel safe, even though the world is not necessarily a safe place. But we need our children to feel safe. We need them to look to us, to trust us, and we need to be there for them. So I hope some of this is going to be helpful to you. And we do have a few minutes for questions, so I'm going to stop the sharing and turn it over to Roberta. I don't know if you've been able to monitor some of the questions or some of the comments, but if there's a couple that you'd like to present to me, I'd do my best to try and answer them.
Sure. Yes, sure. Thank you, Eva. Thank you so much. We've had a few come in. I know there's still some more coming in as you were wrapping up there. Something that's come up a couple of times is what can we do to support kids who are getting stuck, those that are getting stuck? Both questions mention the term stuck, like stuck emotionally.
Yeah.
I know you've given some examples, but perhaps you could elaborate
Well,
a bit.
and again, some of our children, children on the autism spectrum disorder are often children that are very stuck, and it's going to take a long time. It's really a very, it's kind of like, little drops of water on a stone. But if these are some of the practices. If we come alongside, if we have a couple of children in our home and one of them is stuck, one of them is less willing to talk about emotion, but the other one is, just in the hearing of that other child, say, oh yes, it's so frustrating right now. It's really scary, and you don't look at the child who doesn't want to talk about that, but you bring it up as a topic. It's okay to talk about being scared. It's okay to talk about being sad. Oh my goodness, and give permission and space for that. Sadly, I was with a young mother, and I know her heart was in the right place, but her little girl started talking about being sad, and she said, no, 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 honey, now be happy, be happy. And I thought, oh my goodness. So just the more we talk, give permission and space for these emotions, the more our stuck children will perhaps realize that it's safe to talk about those vulnerable things. Some of our stuck children, of course, go into tantrums and attack, and that's where the pool noodles and some of these places actively, like right after school, if there's someone at home or that can actually do some pool noodle fighting with them, do some things to get that attacking energy out in a play mode. And again, I refer you to the recording that I did on play, because there were lots of ideas there. And I also do believe you had a second session on play where somebody else was talking about all the different ways that we can play with children. But play is a wonderful, wonderful way of helping children with emotions that are too big for them to deal with in real life.
Yes, yes, great. Thank you. Thank you. Another thing is a couple of people have been asking about kids who are experiencing a lot of frustration, where frustration seems to be one of the biggest emotions, and it could be frustration for very small things that carry over,
Yes,
etc.
over and over. Again, giving space for it. I'm becoming more and more a fan of bubble wrap because there's something very satisfying about stomping on bubble wrap. It's one of those things like we've um, there have been approaches in in psychology and in child management, and I listen, at my age I've been through every one of those waves, where we try to stop the behavior. Where we say, well, no, I mean, if a child is stomping their foot, we got to stop that, cut it out, cut it out, cut it out. Well, actually, now that we understand more, and luckily we have the neuroscience to support us in that, now that we understand more about the role of emotion, if a child, does a lot of stomping, let's give them a place to do that. Set up a corner, in your hallway, in your entranceway, and do some bubble wrap stomping. I think most of us also could benefit from that. I remember one mother telling me that her little girl, and the little girl ended up with a pretty complicated diagnosis, but the diagnosis had not yet happened. And she said, my little girl comes home and I try and talk to her and trying to ask her what happened at school and, whatever. And all she wants to do is go down and jump on the trampoline. But she doesn't want to put her books away. Doesn't want to do this, doesn't want to do that. I said, well, jumping on the trampoline might be what she needs. Make it really easy for her to find the trampoline, to jump on the trampoline. And if it's going to take 10, 15, 20 minutes, once she's gotten some of that out, she'll probably come back up the stairs and be more willing to do the things that you asked her to do. And again, in this time of COVID, we have to actually, um, we're having to rethink some of the things that we're worried about. And sometimes we just need to give space for it. Again, there's a whole talk I can give on that. Some people have attended some of those talks. Maybe this is something that I could do, but there's a lot of frustration that needs to get let out. How can we help it come out in a way that doesn't cause problems for other people?
Great, thank you. Thank you, that's great. We've had a couple of questions come in about the fact of kids being home. Say some of the kids not going to school, they're going to be doing things online, and parents working from home and trying to juggle all that. And then the possibility that, parents may not have the ability or time to give as much attention to their kids and kids' emotions.
Well, there's never enough time for that. If children had their way, they would have two parents, there would be no siblings. They would have you 24/7, and even that wouldn't solve the problem. The reality is life is all about, things working and things not working. And yes, there's going to be many times you're going to say no to your child and they're not going to be happy and they're going to stomp around and they're going to pout and they're going to do this and they're going to do that. Those are the ups and downs of emotion. I think that again, sometimes our concern is, well, what if they don't get the work done? What if they can't keep up with the work? But we don't even know what the work is anymore, because again, any curriculum plan that we have right now is on hold. It's on hold. It's been on hold since March. Again, I just want to reiterate, though, just because the curriculum is not being taught, it doesn't mean that our children's brains are not growing and developing. It's the curriculum is our way of trying to figure out what kids need and making it into chunks that will work for them. But that's not necessarily how the brain learns. I know that I have many cases of children, my daughter in particular. My daughter was not able to read independently until she was in grade 4. She had a specific learning disability, and yet and the psychologist child, right? So I for whatever reason, my father got very upset with me. He said, why aren't you getting here into tutoring and this and that and the other thing? And I thought, no, just let it be. We'll get there eventually. And then finally, when she got into grade 4, she started reading, and she's completed university and has an advanced degree and so on. So we have not a good understanding of how the brain works. So sometimes when kids are at home, yes, we need them to keep busy, but you know what? If a child is actually keeping themselves busy and playing with Lego and playing with blocks and playing with puppets and drawing and doing those kinds of things, those are actually just as healthy for the child as following the curriculum. Again, we want to try and do as best we can to make it happen, but there aren't going to be the same expectations as there were before, because as we enter into this new world of school, everyone's expectations are going to have to be pretty minimalist. But again, as a developmentalist, I do not necessarily believe that this is going to long-term harm our children. There will be little bumps along the way, but we're going to come out of this and it's not going to affect our children's ability to understand the world and to develop the skills that they need. And a lot of our children, by the way, being at home, doing the cooking, doing the baking with their parents, all those kinds of things. So yes, while you're working, maybe you can't spend as much time with your child as you like to, but just remember, when 5 o'clock comes, you are there for your child. And we've had children say to some of us last May when kids went back in, we had one little guy who said, I really liked my mommy and daddy being at home. I liked them being there. I liked knowing where they were. Now, I'm sure mommy and daddy did not have the perfect angel on their hands, but that was how the child saw the world. I like my mommy and daddy being close. I like my parents being close. So it won't be perfect, but trust in the process, I guess.
Thank you, Eva. You've given us lots of great ideas and suggestions and reassurance. Could we have one? Could you take one more question before we wrap up? Or okay,
Yeah, one more. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. We've had one question come in from a teacher, wondering about, from the teacher's perspective, whether or not to approach the children and ask them about their feelings, or wait for kids to be expressing things, or yeah.
Yeah, well, again, there is no easy answer. Some children are going to be very open about it, but I think, again, I think as educators, we read the room. You know, we read the room, and again, we're going to be doing a series of workshops. If you are not already signed up for it, we have one on the emotional world of children, where we talk about how to play with emotions, how to do things, how to activities that you can do that will bring emotion out that children don't even know, because we're really working at creating the emotional world of children. So if you, by the way, if your child comes home and says, we did a lot of painting today, or we did a lot of singing and dancing today, or we did, that's because that's what we're recommending to the teachers. And definitely if one child says, I'm scared, you know, you can talk about, yeah, it's scary right now. But again, we're here, we'll figure it out, we'll get through this. And so, you know, it's really an ebb and flow. We don't want to force children to speak about their emotions if they're not ready, but you know, a lot of them are really quite ready to talk about it, and it's important that we acknowledge them and work with them. Yeah, so I see we're
Okay,
just
great.
about on our, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Eva. Yeah, there have been several other great questions come in. Unfortunately, for our time, we don't have time to get to all of them. But you know, I'd just like to mention a couple of things, and on behalf of the Montreal Centre for Learning Disabilities and all of the team, we really want to thank you for your preparation, your expertise, and your understanding of the current times, and offering so many wonderful insights and suggestions to guide us through this. I also would just like to also mention that there's a free weekly parent support group through the MCLD Tuesday evenings from 7 to 8:30 p.m. starting next Tuesday. And you can check the website, which I did put in the chat box, but I'll put it in again for those that didn't see it. So just check the website. And many of you are wondering about the recording. So the recording about play, and also this recording, they will be put up. We're aiming for September 1st, so maybe before, but let's look to September 1st, and the recordings will be up on the website. So I think that's all from my end. We just really appreciate your time, and I'd like to thank all of you who have joined us. At one point, we were up to 260 people. Wow. So far, that's the largest webinar that I've been part of, and I don't know if that's for the MCLD as well. Yeah. So.
Well, I wish everyone the best. These are not easy times, but we all are going to be there for our children, support them as best we can through this, and hope that we can be making the best decisions that we can for our children. So I wish you all the best, and thank you very much, Roberta.
Okay, you're very welcome. Thank you.